Welcome to episode 35 of the Rescued by Dragons fantasy podcast, Tales of the Brunch Club. My name is Brian Messmer, and I'm not only your storyteller, but the dungeon master behind the homebrew Dungeons & Dragons campaign this story is based on. Please join me as I tell the tale of how my players and the dice ruined and improved my perfectly laid plans. But first, a quick recap. In episode 34, the Brunch Club reached Calavar's Island, but their ship could not get close to shore. They took rowboats to complete the journey, but were attacked by 8 harpies, who immediately charmed everyone but Diesa. The dice rolls of fate were repeatedly not in their favor, and one by one the members of the Brunch Club fell. Fortunately, a great bronze dragon living on the island took pity on them and came to their rescue. When they awoke in the dragon's cave, they learned that he was, in fact, Calavar. They convinced him to come back to Elnor with them. As a reward for their courage, he gave them a set of enchanted leather armor which the group decided Diesa should have. Calavar let them rest to regain strength after their near-death experience. The next morning, they rode Calavar back to Elnor, where he made a dramatic entrance by landing on the crystal spire of the Great Library. And now, episode 35. Vacation. All I've ever wanted. A small throng of merchants and tradesmen, who were normally up at an early hour, gathered below the Crystal Spire Library to watch the mighty bronze dragon shoot lightning into the air. Calavar heaved himself off the Crystal Spire and glided down to the large expanse of steps that led to the library. When the dragon landed, those watching noticed there were 6 people riding the dragon's back. A chorus of, "Who are they?" passed through the onlookers as they watched 5 members of the group slide down the dragon's tail. They landed gently on the steps, as if dismounting from a dragon was an everyday occurrence for them. Then the 6th member, a silver-haired elf in black armor, tripped on one of the dragon's scales and tumbled down the side of the noble beast. She landed in a heap behind her colleagues. "Way to kill our dramatic entrance, Drew," Salus kidded her. Drusilla stood up quickly, acting as if everything was normal. A portal appeared on the steps in front of them, and Selania stepped through it. She looked as powerful and as beautiful as ever, not like someone who had just been woken up by the arrival of a dragon in their city 2 minutes before. "I'm glad to see you're all safe," she said warmly. "I began to worry when the damsel arrived without her passengers and captain." She smiled at Captain Butler. "Thank you, Frank. Another job well done. Your crew will be happy to see you." Captain Butler bowed, knowing this was his cue to depart. "My pleasure, as always," he said, and walked down the steps, ignoring the astonished stares of the small crowd. The dragon seemed to shimmer for a moment. Its giant body collapsed in on itself and shrunk in a twisting blur of smoky ribbons before coalescing into the form of a stern-looking, elderly wizard in bronze robes. "Selania," the dragon greeted her. "Calavar, thank you so much for answering my request." Selania maintained an official air of dignity, but the others could tell she was barely containing her nervous excitement. Selania turned to the Brunch Club and asked them to each hold out their hands so they might receive their reward. All of them did, except Jory, who stepped back, not sure if he'd been with the group long enough to deserve one. Diesa elbowed him in the ribs and silently gestured for him to hold out his hand. In each of their hands, Selania placed a stone. The stones were hexagonal and engraved with the symbol of the Crystal Spire Library. Alora, Salus, and Diesa stared at the stones and realized that, after all this time, they finally gained access to the fabled library, and possibly the answers to their questions they had been seeking for so long. "Cool rocks," Diesa commented. The stones vanished in their hands. The symbol of the library glowed faintly beneath their skin on their palms, before fading away. "Very cool rocks," Jory agreed. "The library cards are part of you now. You're able to come and go to the library as you please," Selania said to them. "Speaking of coming and going," interjected Calavar, "it might be best for you to leave Elnor for a week or so. Not everyone is going to be happy I'm here, and if they learn that you are responsible for my arrival, it may not be safe for you." "We should go back to Wheaton," Drusilla said. "Excellent idea. Follow me," said Selania as she ascended the steps to the doors of the library. They entered into a large hallway with runes carved into the floor. When they stepped across the markings, they felt their hands tingle slightly. They looked at them and saw the sigil of the Crystal Spire Library glow just beneath their palms once more. Just past the hallway, another engraving was etched into the floor. This was a round design and large enough for several people to stand in the middle. As the group approached, energy arced and crackled just above the floor's surface. Solania put her hand out to stop the group. A portal opened in the middle of the carved runes and a large figure stepped out. He was a half-orc. He wore nothing more than boots and a kilt. A large bag was slung over his shoulder. A cockeyed chicken poked its head out from the bag's opening as the strange figure passed them without acknowledging their presence. "Master Gobbler," Solania greeted him curtly with a quick nod. The half-orc grunted a quick "good day" and continued down the hallway. Solania made no further mention of the half-orc and invited the brunch club to step inside the circle. She took a large gem from the inside of her robe, which caught Dieza's appreciative eye. Solania held her hand over it, muttered an incantation, and a bright blue light surrounded the party, obscuring their view of everything else in the room outside the circle. The light faded, and they found themselves standing in front of a fountain in the main square of Wheaton. The party looked around, appreciating their sudden change of surroundings, except for Drusilla, who teetered, off balance. "Sorry, I wasn't expecting that," she apologized as she grabbed Dieza's shoulder to steady herself. "Pfft, elves," Dieza muttered under her breath. "Too damn tall." "I heard that," Alora said. Wheaton looked in much better condition than when they had left it. The buildings that were burned during the Knoll invasion were nearly repaired. The city gates and the guard tower were completely rebuilt. "So what now?" Jory asked. "Brunch," the rest of them said in unison, and led Jory to the White Claw Inn. At brunch, the group decided they should go see Saberhagen and catch him up on their adventures, and give him the supplies that he'd asked the group to fetch for him while they were in Elnor. "Who's Saberhagen?" asked Jory. They told Jory and Dieza that Saberhagen was the wizard who owned the Sunspot Magic Emporium, and acted as sort of a patron for the brunch club in exchange for them spreading the word of his store and magic inventory across the land. They hadn't seen much of the land outside of Wheaton and Elnor, though, so as of yet, they hadn't lived up to their part of the bargain. Laura told them it was Saberhagen that gave her the Phoenix Arrow. They all conveniently left out the small tidbit of information for Dieza and Jory that Saberhagen was a cat. Drusilla, Alora, and Salas led the way to the Sunspot, a few paces ahead of Jory and Dieza. "I feel like we've experienced so much since we were last here," Salas said. "I do too. It hasn't even been that long," Drusilla agreed. "We should walk through town like we're really cool," suggested Salas. "Yes," Drusilla agreed enthusiastically. "Like a flying V formation." Dieza and Jory watched as Drusilla stepped forward, and Salas and Alora fell back a bit on either side of her. They matched strides, although Salas did have to add a couple of steps to keep formation. "Why are they walking so slowly?" Jory whispered to Dieza. "I have no idea," she answered. "Weird. How long have you known them?" he asked. "Not long enough, apparently." They saw a familiar face on the way to the Sunspot. It was Druin, the blacksmith, who had given Vorjon his two-headed flail, Eclipse, as a gift for saving the town from the Knoll attack. "We should probably let him know about Vorjon," Salas said solemnly. They approached the blacksmith, who greeted them politely. Drusilla told him what happened to Vorjon and apologized for not being able to return Eclipse to him, but assured him it served the paladin right up until he sacrificed his life to save his friend. Druin accepted her apology and wished the rest of them luck and hoped they did not befall a similar fate. He also told them the Knolls had not returned to the town, though small groups of them were regularly spotted in the forest to the north. They bid the blacksmith good day and proceeded, in formation, to Saberhagen's. The magic bell rang when the brunch club opened the door to the Sunspot. "Wow!" exclaimed Jory with wonder. "I've been in magic shops before, but this place is incredible! Looks like an eccentric wizard's attic." "Thank you," a voice said behind him. Jory turned to see a formally dressed human male standing there. His hands were extended and held a pillow. A black and white tuxedo cat with a fancy jeweled collar sat regally on the pillow. "I'm glad you like my store, little halfling," the cat said. "Oh my gods, you have a talking cat! This is great!" Jory said happily. "You must be the best wizard ever." Saberhagen narrowed his eyes at Jory. He then noticed Drusilla, Alora, and Sallis standing in the doorway, grinning mischievously. "You didn't tell him, did you?" the cat asked them. "Nope," said Alora, no longer able to conceal her laughter. "Saberhagen, this is Jory. Jory, this is Saberhagen," Sallis said, introducing them. The wizard glared at Sallis. "I now prefer to be addressed as His Lordship Saberhagen, Bane of Canines, Master of Magic, and Taker of Naps." Sallis shrugged. "Whatever. Saberhagen's been working so far." Saberhagen seemed to notice the dwarven rogue with the fresh scars on her face for the first time. "You're terrifying," Saberhagen said matter-of-factly to Diesa. "Thanks," replied Diesa in the same tone, before sneezing loudly. "I'm also allergic to cats," she said, without apologizing. Jenkins placed Saberhagen, as well as his pillow, on a stool next to the shop's counter. Drusilla presented a cloth sack to the wizard. "Here's the items you wanted us to get you from Elnor," she said. "It took you long enough. That was weeks ago," the wizard replied curtly. "You go off on adventures and forget about old Saberhagen. I see how it is." Drusilla told Saberhagen everything the group had done and been through since they were last in Wheaton. If the cat was sad about Vorjon's demise, he did not show it. When Drusilla finished her tale, Saberhagen said, "Jenkins!" Jenkins clapped twice to summon himself to his master's side. He began taking the items out of the bag, one by one. As Jenkins placed each of them on the counter, Saberhagen looked at them and said, "Excellent," and then batted each of them onto the floor with his paw. "Jenkins, pick those up," the cat said once the bag was empty. "Better late than never," he said, turning to the brunch club. Technically you never gave us a deadline," Sallis pointed out. Saberhagen ignored her. "There's nothing else then. I have to get back to my nap," he said, hoping to dismiss them. "Actually," Drusilla said, much to the cat's annoyance, "we found these in the tomb where Vorjon died. Could you identify them for us?" Drusilla placed a purple gem, a gold brooch, and 2 identically engraved rectangular stones on the counter. Saberhagen looked at the objects. His tail twitched with interest. He dismissively slid the stones to the side and said, "Those are just sending stones," before inspecting the gem and the brooch more closely. "What are sending stones?" asked Alora. The cat rolled his eyes and huffed at the group's ignorance of all things arcane. "It allows 2 people holding the stones to cast a sending spell between them once per day," he explained quickly. Drusilla picked the stones up excitedly and exclaimed, "Cool! Rocky Talkies!" Saberhagen stared blankly. "Sure," he said before turning his attention back to the remaining 2 items. "This," he said, pointing to the gold piece of jewelry, "is a brooch of protection. It will give its wearer extra protection against force damage." The group decided Sallis should wear that. She took it and pinned the small gold shield happily to her robe. "Now this," said Saberhagen with a hint of excitement creeping into his normally aloof manner, "is an Ioun stone. It's very useful." "What does it do?" asked Diesa, admiring the beautiful gem. Saberhagen moved it around on the table with his paw, tipping it over to admire its facets. "As of yet, I am not quite certain. There's a few different varieties of these. Only one way to be sure." The cat began muttering an incantation as his eyes glowed with the silver energy. One quick identify spell later, and he had an answer for them. A caster can store a small amount of spell energy in this stone for later. The spells can then be cast by anyone wielding the stone, regardless of if they are a spellcaster or not, Saberhagen explained. "Given our luck lately, we should fill it with healing spells," muttered Jory. Drusilla took the Ioun stone, thanked Saberhagen for his expertise, and hoped he enjoyed his nap. "It was nice to meet you, His Lordship Saberhagen, Bane of Canines, Master of Magics, and Taker of Naps," Jory shouted back at the wizard on the way out. "I like that one," purred the cat, as he curled up onto his warm pillow. "Where to now?" Sallis asked, as they stood outside the sunspot. We should pick something up to make a shrine for Harir on the island," Drusilla suggested. "Oh yeah," agreed Alora. "Maybe a big pile of beef jerky." "You're not going to build a shrine to Vorjon?" Jory asked curiously. "Oh yeah, I guess him too," said Drusilla. "We could get a pair of silver-plated boots," suggested Sallis. After much debate about an appropriate tribute to Vorjon, they finally decided on a shining steel weather vane in the shape of Bahamut for the top of the lighthouse. They placed the order with Druin at his forge, and then went to Wilhelm's Ware's dry goods store to get beef jerky before heading to the island. The craggy ex-fisherman Morton greeted them warmly at the docks and pointed out a rowboat that was reserved for them to go to and from the island as they pleased. As they rowed across the harbor, Drusilla pointed out which of the 2 lighthouses in it was theirs and told Jory and Diesa, "When we first came to this lighthouse, it was infested with herpes." "Your lighthouse had herpes?" Jory asked, confused. The others burst out into laughter. "I said harpies!" Drusilla protested. "Oh no," Laura laughed. "You definitely said herpes." "Man, I hate it when your lighthouse gets harpies. They're so annoying and hard to get rid of," Salas joked. "And they keep coming back, too," Laura added through tears of laughter. "Fuck you guys," Drusilla said, crossing her arms in frustration. "You know what I meant." She pouted playfully. They tied the dory up at the newly rebuilt dock and walked to Harir's stone grave to place their offering of beef jerky upon it. After a respectful moment of silence, they continued to the lighthouse. The lighthouse looked bright and fresh, with a new coat of whitewash on its stone surface. The scaffold was still up, but had begun to be dismantled. A new, thick, freshly varnished oak and iron door was now in place. It wasn't until they went to open it the group realized none of them had a key. "No worries," said Diesa. She took out her lock-picking tools and began feeling around the tumbler mechanism inside. It was a quality lock, but Diesa was able to open it within a few minutes. The transformation inside the lighthouse astonished them. The once abandoned, rotting lighthouse interior now looked like a warm, inviting home. The first level contained a kitchen and dining area with several comfortable chairs and sofas in a separate conversation area. The next 3 levels were split into living quarters. The top floor, where the beacon and other equipment once sat, was now an open, circular room encased in glass. "This would make a great alchemy laboratory," Drusilla said with enthusiasm. They took the rowboat back to shore and went to see Mayor Gladstone to tell him of Calavar's arrival in Elnor. The mayor seemed genuinely glad to see them, and seemed hopeful that Wheaton's strained relationship with Elnor might improve if Calavar could indeed check the Council of Five's power. "How long do you plan to stay in Wheaton?" the mayor asked them. They looked at each other quizzically. They hadn't thought about what their plans were other than laying low for a week. "I could use a bit of a break after dying twice in less than a week," Salas said. "I'd like to set up my alchemy lab, and I could maybe make us some healing potions," said Drusilla. "How long will that take?" asked Alora. "About 6 weeks, the cleric answered. "6 weeks with no one trying to kill us?" Salas said, leaning back in her chair and crossing her arms behind her head. "That sounds like the perfect vacation." Our tale will continue in episode 36. Episode 35 was written by Dominic White and myself, Brian Messmer. The story is based upon my own homebrew Dungeons & Dragons campaign. Additional role-playing contributions to the story by Bethany Powers, who played Diesa, J.P. Black, who plays Drusilla, Liz Raychard, who plays Alora, Anna Flemke, who plays Salas, and Dominic White, who plays Jory. Ambience and effects used with permission by Michael Gelfi. If you enjoyed this podcast, please help us out by sharing it with your friends and rating and reviewing us on your favorite podcast platform. We really appreciate it. More information about Rescued by Dragons and ways to support this podcast can be found at rescuedbydragons.com. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Rescued by Dragons, on Twitter at Rescue Dragons, and on YouTube under Rescued by Dragons. Thank you for listening, and please join me next week to see what my players' choices and the rolls of the dice have in store.
And we did, just so you know, Diesa and Jory, we did have to fight herpes to get here.
Wait, there's herpes here?
Didn't we?
Harpies.
Herpes.
Yeah.
I said herpes!
You said herpes?
I said herpes!
Yeah, I feel like you say it kind of weird.
Yeah.
I said herpes!
I'm
just throwing my words.
I know. Yes, harpies. We fought so many.
There's harpies here?
Not anymore.
There were.
Oh, phew.
Our lighthouse had harpies.
It was very phallic.
Oh my god.
Oh.
Plans to scaffold.
Better now.
All plans.
No, it wasn't.
Herpes.
Yes.
Oh, well, But you know, that time we won.
All right, you know what? I tried.
No,
What, are you trying to say something? Because
No, I'm just saying
Technically-
herpes.
Technically,
Herpes are the worst. No one
Do you
wants
ever really
herpes.
get rid of them?
I mean,
Go
anyone who
away.
gets herpes is pissed right the fuck off. They're annoying.
They keep coming back.
Doesn't matter what you do. No one likes herpes.
unless they charm you. What? What are we talking about?
The rails are back there.
And they're gonna look at
Harpies the same. Whew, got hot.
Oh, okay.
Talking about harpies gets you hot?
No!
Yeah.
Liz is in a
Herpes.
We all know that.